My stepmom left my dad after I refused to let her walk me down the aisle. And now he has a shocking confession before my wedding. It was supposed to be a day filled with love and unity. But instead, it began with a shocking confession that turned my entire perspective on family upside down. My name is Lily, and as I prepared for my wedding day, I had no idea how much the past, with all its pain and complexity, was about to resurface. To understand why my wedding became a battleground for emotions that had been buried for years, I have to take you back to my childhood. I grew up in what seemed like a picture-perfect family. My parents, Claire and Tom, were college sweethearts who got married young and welcomed me into their lives when they were 25. My early years were filled with the kind of warmth you see in movies, weekends at the lake, family game nights, and bedtime stories that made me feel safe and loved. Life was full of those small moments that you think will last forever. But things changed when I turned 10. I began noticing that my dad was working late more often, and my mom's face had lost its usual sparkle. It wasn't long before the fights started, and they were always about a name I had never heard before, Tanya. I remember coming home one day to find my mom crying at the kitchen table. She told me my father had been unfaithful, that the woman's name was Tanya, and they were getting divorced. It was like someone had taken the life I knew and turned it into something unrecognizable, filled with tears, confusion, and an emptiness I didn't understand. The divorce was traumatic. My parents fought over everything: custody, the house, even small things like family photos. I spent a lot of time in courtrooms, sitting outside while they argued inside. My mom eventually won primary custody, but I still saw my dad every other weekend. At first, I didn't want to go. I was angry at him for breaking our family and hurting my mom. But she, being the amazing person she is, encouraged me to give him a chance. He made a mistake, but he still loves you. And it's okay to love him too, she said. Slowly, I started to enjoy spending time with my dad again. He tried to make up for the lost time, taking me to movies, teaching me how to cook, badly, I might add, and talking to me about school. But then, 2 years after the divorce, he told me he was marrying Tanya. I met Tanya for the first time at a dinner my dad arranged. She was polite and brought me a gift, a diary with my name embossed on it. But no gift could erase the fact that she was the reason my family had fallen apart. Tanya was relentless in trying to build a relationship with me. She bought me gifts, suggested mother-daughter activities, and even tried to involve herself in every aspect of my life. But it all felt forced, like she was trying too hard to be someone I didn't want her to be. My loyalty to my mom only made it harder for me to accept Tanya's efforts. My dad and Tanya didn't make things easier either. They often spoke ill of my mom, making comments like, "If only your mother could move on like we have." It hurt because my mom had never once spoken badly about them. She always took the high road, encouraging me to try to have a relationship with them despite her own pain. Things came to a head when Tanya got pregnant. My dad was ecstatic and kept talking about having a real family. It hurt me deeply because it made me feel like I was just a remnant of his old life, not part of his new, real family. Tanya miscarried at 20 weeks, and while I felt sadness for their loss, I also felt a sense of guilty relief that I wouldn't be replaced by a new baby. After the miscarriage, Tanya tried even harder to be close to me. She began introducing me as her daughter and insisted I call her Mom. I refused. I already had a mother, and no one could take her place. As I grew older, my connection with Tanya became even more strained. She and my dad continued to try to force a bond that just wasn't there. And then, it was time for my wedding. Richard and I met in college, and he was everything I could have hoped for: kind, patient, and loving. As we planned our wedding, I knew there was no one else I wanted by my side to walk me down the aisle except my mom. She had always been my rock, the one who stood by me through every storm. When I told my dad and Tanya about my decision, all hell broke loose. Tanya broke down in tears, and my dad was furious. He said I was being selfish and that Tanya deserved to walk me down the aisle too because she had been in my life for so long. But to me, time didn't matter. It was about who had been there for me, who had loved me unconditionally. And that person was my mom. My dad threatened not to come to the wedding if Tanya wasn't given a significant role. He listed all the things Tanya had done for me, the gifts, the activities, as if those could compare to the love my mom had shown me every day. It was then that I realized how much they didn't understand me. They thought love was something you could buy, something you could earn through gestures. But love, real love, is something that grows over time, through consistency and genuine care. I wasn't willing to compromise on my wedding day. I wanted it to be a celebration of love, not a battleground for old wounds. The next few weeks were tense. My dad and Tanya stopped talking to me, and I constantly checked my phone, half expecting an angry message. But then, out of nowhere, Tanya called. She was crying, apologizing for everything, and asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, hoping we could finally find some common ground. At first, the conversation went well. She even said she accepted my decision about the wedding. But then she brought up something unexpected. She and my dad were planning to renew their vows. And she wanted me to walk her down the aisle. It felt like she was trying to make my wedding about her, trying to find a way to equalize things. I couldn't believe it. I told her no. A wedding isn't about balancing scores. And my wedding day was not the place to heal old wounds. Tanya became angry, accusing me of not giving her a chance, of being cold-hearted. She brought up her miscarriage again, using it as emotional leverage. I finally told her what I had kept inside for years, that I was tired of her trying to force a relationship that wasn't there, and that it wasn't fair to put the burden of her unfulfilled desires on me. She left the cafe in tears, and I felt a strange mix of guilt and relief. I had finally spoken my truth. Later that day, my dad called, furious. He said I had been cruel to Tanya, that I owed her an apology. He even said that if I couldn't accept Tanya as my mother, then maybe I shouldn't consider him my father. His words cut deep. I had always believed, despite everything, that my dad loved me. But in that moment, it felt like he was choosing Tanya over me, just like he had all those years ago. Richard was there for me, holding me while I cried, reassuring me that I had every right to set boundaries. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a roller coaster. I decided to write a letter to my dad and Tanya, explaining my feelings and setting clear boundaries. I told them I wanted a relationship, but it had to be on my terms, terms that respected my relationship with my mom. I also made it clear that if they couldn't accept my decision, they wouldn't be invited to the wedding. It was a hard letter to write, but it felt necessary. And then, one day, my dad showed up at my apartment. He looked exhausted, broken. He told me that Tanya had left him. She had moved in with her sister, saying she couldn't handle the rejection anymore. My dad was a mess, blaming himself, blaming me, apologizing for everything. He asked if I would be willing to go to family therapy with him and Tanya. But I said no. I needed time to process everything. Then he told me something I wasn't prepared for, that when Tanya got pregnant, they had been trying for a baby because they thought it would make me accept her as a mother. I felt manipulated, like my feelings had been ignored in their pursuit of a perfect family. After my dad left, I called my mom. She listened, like she always did, and gave me the best advice she could, to take time to think about what I wanted my relationship with my dad to look like. Richard agreed, reminding me that my dad's confession, while painful, was at least a step toward honesty. Eventually, I decided to keep my dad's invitation to the wedding open, but I made it clear that it was only for him. I sent him an email explaining my decision and told him that I was willing to work on our relationship, but it would take time. On the day of the wedding, my mom walked me down the aisle. It was everything I had hoped for, a day filled with love, with people who genuinely cared for us. My dad came, and while things between us were still complicated, it felt like a step forward. After the ceremony, he pulled me aside, apologizing once more for everything. He promised to try harder, to be a better father. He admitted that he had made mistakes, that he had tried to force something that couldn't be forced. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a beginning. As Richard and I settled into married life, I realized that my wedding wasn't just the start of our life together. It was also a new chapter in my relationship with my family. I had learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, that sometimes you have to put your own well-being first. I learned that love isn't something you can demand, it has to grow naturally. My dad and I still have a long way to go, but for the first time in years, I feel hopeful. I hope this story reminds you that love, boundaries, and forgiveness are complex, but they are also the keys to living a life that feels true to yourself. Relationships can be messy, especially within families, but the most important thing is to find a balance that respects everyone involved, including yourself. Parents ignored my milestones for my brother's events. So I didn't tell them about my wedding. Now they're publicly shamed and facing divorce. In the quiet, sun-dappled neighborhood where our story begins, two siblings grew up under the same roof but in entirely different worlds. One was adored, the other ignored, but both were bound by a shared destiny that seemed inevitably set for conflict. Today, we unravel the journey of a young woman who learned the hardest way that not every family is built on love, and how that realization gave her the strength to create a new definition of family for herself. From the moment Mike was born, it became painfully clear who was the golden child. The parents, both in their early 50s, had always wanted a son, and when Mike came along, they saw him as nothing less than the universe's greatest gift. He was showered with praise for every small thing, even when he did nothing to deserve it. The mother transformed, becoming the epitome of those so-called boy moms who saw nothing beyond their precious son. The father, perhaps too meek to intervene, allowed his wife's favoritism to flourish. The older sister, let's call her Anna, had been used to getting some attention before Mike was born. She was bright, passionate, and always eager to impress her parents with her little achievements. But as her mother grew more engrossed in Mike's needs, Anna became like a forgotten photograph in a dusty attic, there, but unnoticed. Even though she tried her best to do well in school, participate in sports, and take part in activities that her mother once enjoyed, it felt like nothing she did was ever enough. The problem wasn't that Mike needed special attention, he wasn't sick. He didn't struggle in school, and he wasn't particularly vulnerable. It was just that their mother had decided that Mike's smallest sneeze was more important than Anna's loudest shout for help. By the time Anna was a teenager, she realized she was on her own. The harsh truth was difficult to swallow. The people who were supposed to be her champions had turned their backs on her, choosing instead to focus all their energy on her younger brother. Anna learned the value of independence far earlier than most. At school, she excelled. Not only did she achieve excellent grades, but she also became known for her compassion and willingness to help others. It was ironic. At home, she was practically invisible, but at school, she found friends who appreciated her and teachers who praised her abilities. Among those friends, there was Lucas. He was the boy who sat behind her in English class, the one with a quiet smile and eyes that seemed to understand more than most. Lucas became her confidant, and over time, they developed a friendship that gave Anna a glimpse of what genuine care felt like. Life at home continued to be lonely. When Anna graduated from high school, her parents weren't in the audience. Instead, they were at one of Mike's sporting events, cheering as he fumbled through a game he wasn't even particularly good at. Anna had grown used to it. She knew they would choose Mike every single time. What she hadn't expected was the painful realization that even milestones that should have been her proudest moments, her graduation, her first job offer, were eclipsed by her brother's more mundane accomplishments. It wasn't that Mike was malicious, he was just a product of the love he received. He loved the attention, and he loved knowing that Anna didn't get the same. He knew how to play his mother against Anna, and Anna quickly learned that any attempt to stand up for herself would end with her being gaslit and accused of jealousy. There was one person in Anna's life who never let her down, though, her grandfather. He lived far away, on the opposite side of the country, but he was a beacon of support and strength. Whenever Anna felt lost, she would call him. He had always seen through her parents' favoritism and had made it a point to support Anna in every way he could, even if it was just a phone call to remind her that she was not alone. He often told her, "You can't choose the family you're born into, but you can choose the family you create." Those words stuck with Anna, especially in the most difficult moments. When Anna went to university, she worked 2 jobs to pay her tuition. The college fund her parents had promised her? It had mysteriously disappeared, used to cover the costs of Mike's new car and his college housing. Anna never even received an apology. Her mother merely said, "We had to help Mike. He's your brother, and family comes first." It was laughable. In a way, Anna couldn't remember a time when she had come first. Lucas, who had gone to the same university, remained Anna's closest friend. He watched as she juggled her coursework, her jobs, and her family struggles. They spent countless nights talking, sharing their hopes for the future. Over time, their friendship blossomed into something more. Lucas was the first person to tell Anna that she deserved love. Real love. And he made her believe it. By the time they graduated, they were inseparable, both starting promising careers and finally moving into a shared apartment far from the shadow of Anna's family. It was a year later, after Lucas proposed, that Anna made the decision that would change everything. She and Lucas wanted a small, intimate wedding. They weren't interested in a grand affair, just a ceremony that felt right, something that celebrated their love and the people who had truly supported them. Lucas insisted that Anna should invite her parents. Despite everything, he believed in second chances. And Anna, though hesitant, decided to extend an olive branch. She sent out the invitations, each one crafted with care, hoping that maybe, just maybe, her parents would see this as an opportunity to make things right. But the response was predictable. Her mother barely acknowledged the invitation, instead shifting the conversation to Mike and his recent achievements. When Anna mentioned the wedding date, her mother sighed. "Oh, that's the same day as Mike's big game. You know we can't miss that." It wasn't a surprise, but it still stung. Anna decided not to push it. She simply said, "That's fine," and left it at that. In her heart, she knew they would never choose her. The day of the wedding was perfect. The sun shone down on a small gathering of friends and family, Lucas's family, Anna's grandfather, and a handful of friends who had stood by them through everything. They laughed, danced, and celebrated the love that had grown between two people who understood each other's pain and joy. Anna's grandfather walked her down the aisle, tears in his eyes, whispering how proud he was of her. It was everything Anna had ever wanted, a moment of genuine love, free from the shadows of her past. The aftermath, however, was not as serene. Photos of the wedding, posted by Lucas's aunt, quickly spread on social media. Friends and distant relatives commented on the beautiful ceremony. But the post also caught the attention of Anna's parents. They hadn't realized what they had missed, their daughter's wedding, a day that should have been shared with them. If only they had cared enough to show up. The neighborhood began to whisper, and Anna's parents found themselves at the center of a small but intense scandal. How could they have missed their only daughter's wedding for a football game? Anna's grandfather, who had always been her fiercest supporter, decided it was time to confront his son. He flew in, unannounced, and faced Anna's parents. It was a heated conversation, one that ended with Anna's father in tears. For the first time, he seemed to understand the gravity of what he had done. He had allowed his wife to dictate their relationship with their daughter. And in doing so, he had lost her. He threatened divorce, demanding that his wife make amends with Anna. But Anna was done waiting for apologies. When her parents reached out, first with anger, then with desperation, Anna knew she had a choice to make. She could let them back in, allow them to try to make up for years of neglect, or she could finally close that chapter of her life. With Lucas by her side, she chose the latter. She had spent too many years waiting for their love, but now she understood that real family wasn't about blood. It was about the people who stood by you, who celebrated your successes and held you through your failures. Her parents had never been those people, and she wasn't going to give them another chance to hurt her. Anna blocked their numbers, cutting off contact with the people who had caused her so much pain. She knew it wasn't going to be easy. The longing for their approval was still there. A small voice in the back of her mind that whispered of what could have been. But she also knew that she deserved better. She deserved the kind of love that Lucas gave her, the kind of support her grandfather had always shown. She deserved a family that chose her, every single day. In the weeks that followed, Anna found herself overwhelmed by the support from her friends and from Lucas's family. They filled the void that her parents had left, showing her that love could be unconditional. That family could be something you built for yourself. Her grandfather moved in with them for a while, and together, they began to heal. Anna started therapy, determined to work through the years of hurt and neglect. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable. But with Lucas's steady hand in hers, she kept moving forward. Slowly, she began to let go of the anger that had consumed her for so long. She realized that her parents' inability to love her wasn't her fault. It was their failure, not hers. And with that realization came a sense of freedom. As she sat in her therapist's office one day, Anna spoke the words she had been holding onto for so long. "I don't need their love to be whole." It was a simple statement, but it held all the power she had taken back for herself. She had spent years trying to earn something that was never freely given. But now she understood that her worth wasn't tied to their approval. She was enough, just as she was. Anna's story is one of resilience, of learning to let go of the people who hurt you, even when they are the ones who are supposed to love you the most. It's a reminder that family isn't always about blood, it's about the people who choose you, who stand by you, and who love you without conditions. For Anna, that family was Lucas, her grandfather, and the friends who had always seen her worth. And for anyone out there who feels like they are not enough because their family doesn't see them, remember Anna's story. You are enough, just as you are. You deserve love, and you deserve people who choose you. Every single day, family is what you make it. And sometimes, the best family is the one you build for yourself.